Your moral intuition has been taken away from you.
Our civilization is in an emergency. We are descending down ever faster.
And your moral license to act has been denied to you.
We have to stop being willing to sacrifice the future of our people for our convenience.
We will not abandon you.
We're in the conflict though. You're either serving your enemy or you're serving your side. Right? Those are the choices. It's not whether or not to be in the conflict anymore. We're way past that. That's a luxury we no longer have.
Where good people have to hide, evil flourishes.
We will re-give you that moral authorization.
If we don't have a revolution, in other words, we don't get a reformation, we're going to have a civil war.
All right, and welcome to Field Notes 5. This is the series in which I interview the instructors that are coming on to Modern Minuteman, the second program called Campaign. And today I have with me Mike Shelby. We have been acquainted since last year. He was gracious enough to already come to our in-person conference in Fredericksburg, Texas last year and tell us about the scenarios that are kind of in front of us, which directions things could go. Back then, Trump still wasn't elected yet, and so it was still very much an open question whether we would see this kind of institutional top-down exercise of power against the population in that sense, or whether we would have Trump in power and kind of perhaps get a bit more wind in our sails while we are doing the work on the ground. So welcome to the show, Mike.
Hey, yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So yeah, today I want to talk with you a bit about kind of your background and your mission, and then kind of let the conversation flow a bit, and then at the end have you tell our audience what you're going to contribute to the program as such, teach them in the session itself that you're going to be hosting. For our audience sake, we are organizing a 30-day long campaign, as I'm calling it. Essentially, the idea is to take an online course format and to make it intensely practical and to assist you in moving from caring about these things at a political or intellectual or social media level and translating that care into things you can do actually in your own daily life. And that's also why I've chosen the Minuteman as an archetype from history to revive perhaps and bring into our times, because that is the average citizen soldier that wasn't engaged in the day-to-day conflict with the armed forces as such in the American Revolutionary times, but he was the man who was a farmer perhaps, or a merchant, or another kind of regular citizen who nevertheless could bear a musket, could perhaps pay attention to enemy movements and notify people or participate in taking a hill or defend his town. And so I think we need an archetype like that today, where the average person can understand that the conflict has moved largely from kinetic engagement to information warfare, to psychological warfare, to institutional warfare as well. And so Mike here is an expert in paying attention to how people organize in those spheres. And so Mike, before we get to what is currently happening kind of in the political arena at large in the States that you're mostly paying attention to, why don't you tell us a bit about what your background is, and then how you kind of got involved in doing this work?
Sure. Yeah, well, thanks again for having me. I started off my career as an intelligence analyst. I enlisted in 2004 into the Army. And after that, I got into contracting for several years, and between being a soldier and a contractor, I spent part of every year from 2006 to 2011 deployed to either Iraq or Afghanistan, about 40 months in total. And then in 2012, I just couldn't do it anymore, and for a lot of reasons. And I tried to get away from this field, honestly, because I moved out to Wyoming, and I was a fly fishing guide, and did that for a couple of years, and I missed the fast-paced, kind of high up-tempo stuff of intelligence, and I wasn't going back into contracting. Definitely wasn't going to go back into go be a civvy somewhere. So this was about 2016, and I started seeing all these basically communists, fighting and beating Trump supporters in the streets, and I just said, well, this isn't right. So I started looking into these guys, Well, that's not entirely true. I started following them back in 2015. At any rate, I started looking into them, and I was like, these are like cell-based revolutionary groups, not dissimilar to the insurgent networks that we encountered in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so I started investigating them and writing about them, and then pretty soon people were like, "Hey, you should like charge money for this stuff." And then so that's what I did. I founded Forward Observer as an intelligence company and started writing intelligence reports, not just about the left, but about Russia and China and things that I saw, things that I was seeing going on in the world. And then 2020 hit. We kind of built up the business, and then 2020 hit, and it was nuts for a year and a half. And that kind of put us on the map for taking commercial off-the-shelf technology combined with kind of DIY intelligence skills, like things anyone can learn, and making sense of all the information that was out there. And so that's how I got into it.
Excellent. And so how would you articulate what your mission or your role perhaps in this vast cooperative effort of somehow both defending and at the same time attempting to reform or the American polity, I would assume, but also perhaps the collective European project of our civilization. How would you think of what you're doing yourself, and do you have a very explicit way of kind of this is what I'm aiming at, or is it more emergent and it's pretty clear what you're doing because you have the skills and that's just where you apply them?
Well, look at what's happening in Europe today, our cousins in Europe, and I feel really badly for them. And I think we all here in the States pretty much realize like we're 5, 10, 20 years maybe we're on that same trajectory that much of Europe is in. So, and it's funny that you bring that up because yes, we do need to defend certain parts of our ways of life and then reform or change somehow other parts. So it is kind of this precarious situation where we can't kill the host, but also we've got to do something. So I look at this as probably as predominantly a cultural issue. Maybe even Andrew Breitbart said that, what did he say? Politics is downstream of culture and culture is downstream of religion or something like that. So basically, yeah, let's say some revival in the church. I mean, I think that would be a really good step. I think that would do a massive kind of retaking the church and kind of retaking the church back from the multi-culti kind of, no one can have a nation because of Jesus kind of thing. And that's basically what they say. And no, I actually do want a nation, and I want to give a nation to my kids. And so, I think that would be great. But otherwise, it's either religious or cultural. That's how I look at it. And that starts at the grassroots level, and that starts with you and your neighborhood. You linking up with your friends and marrying a woman and having children and building your tribe, building your neighborhood locally or your clan or whatever you want to call it. And, if we can normalize that, that's a generational, that's, we'll take 2 or 3 generations if we all do it and we're all very deliberate about it. I don't know that we actually have a few generations to solve the problem. So a lot more needs to be done. And so, I think everything at the end of the day comes down to it is political, social, or economic. Political solutions, social solutions, economic solutions. That is how I view the big picture fight, and how you fight the fight is a tactical matter, and it depends on where you are.
Right. There is, I think, a challenge that a lot of younger guys face in participating in this or just orienting themselves properly in the world, which is that we have this amazing technology called the internet, and that offers a vast landscape of opportunity to find people you resonate with. Perhaps you aren't actually surrounded by people that share a certain outlook on the world or that are interested in participating in this kind of collective project. And so that it's very powerful in that way, and for that reason it also tempts us a lot of the times to pay attention to what's going on very far away from our actual local area and thus not actually in our physical environment. And I think what you're doing very much is to bring that attention back to the local physical environment, to of course make use of the technologies that we have available, to pay attention to what's going on and to be connected with others who are doing the same, but to very explicitly be in this, be in a particular place, and to, in some sense, move in the direction of ownership, perhaps again, like not in the ownership necessarily of legal ownership, but ownership of this is my town, my place. I have a right to demonstrate presence and participate in the direction that this goes, and I can take a much more sort of stance in doing so, whether it be showing up to town council meetings, or whether it be paying attention to who are the people, the troublemakers in my environment, who are maybe not yet threatening to me, but in an actual scenario of conflict, I should know about them so that I'm capable of defending against that. So how do you reconcile or contend with this challenge of both the using and not being used by the kind of the internet and these information technologies that tend to both have these advantages and disadvantages, and keeping the healthy balance between that and in-person activity?
Mm-hmm. Well, that is a great point, and I think one of the failures that I have seen over the past, let's just call it 20 years on the right, 15 years since the invention of Facebook, and I guess that was about 20 years ago, is a reliance on connecting with people on the internet. And I think the internet is a great way to connect with ideas, and I would rather connect with people locally. Connect with people in physical spaces, connect with ideas on the internet. The internet is obviously an amazing organizing tool if you're trying to do some big, large-scale, national, like I look at these protests from Indivisible and No Kings. That was all predominantly done over the internet. You go to a website, you sign up, they tell you where to protest. So there obviously is some ways that facilitates connection. I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, but let me just say this. I think the right has gone down the wrong road by trying to implement or organize at the national or state level. And Nassim Taleb has this thing that he calls fractal localism. And the way he uses it is slightly different from how I have interpreted it. But I look at this and I say, I link up with people in my town, and then maybe like the next town's over around me, or people in my county, and then maybe the next people, or the counties next to me. I live in the state of Texas. El Paso is, 12 or 15 hours away or something like that. I will never see those people in my life. I'm definitely never going to El Paso. So it makes no sense for me to try to link up with them on a state level. I should be definitely spending my time linking up with people in the next town over, in the next county over, and that's it. And maybe doing that in physical space. And sure, I can talk to people at the Texas level online. But, for me, all organizing, you organize around issues that you solve, and the issues that you're trying to solve are local. And then maybe you can band together and try to solve regional issues and eventually national issues. But you're not solving national issues without local organizing first. So that's how I look at it.
For that, you need coherence, actually. You need the ability to understand the issues, to account for your shared interests in light of them, and then to actually bring organized action to bear on them. And I think this is definitely something that you can't build from a very discoherent or incoherent hodgepodge of online anons who are sharing memes, which can be valuable to kind of contest the informational space, like for example right now with the revolutionary color that they've chosen of yellow, right? Like they're trying to make that the symbol to use to symbolize this resistance movement, which then will translate into a revolutionary movement. And it's valuable to contest that space so that they are forced to expend either inordinate resources in maintaining that kind of high ground or interpretive high ground, or to actually have to rethink and shift to something else. I think this is definitely a valuable way of viewing the informational space, but it's very hard to bring organized power to bear on something where people have very different interests and where they don't know each other and where they can't actually sacrifice in service of one another because they don't know one another, they don't trust each other. I think this is something that you can really only do on the local level, which is to meet people in person and to, over longer periods of time, interact with them and to make small sacrifices in service of each other's well-being, perhaps, or a shared interest. And through that, build up the trust that is actually necessary to enact anything that requires more dedicated effort. I think this is one of the big things that also Meta Prime, another instructor at our program, talks about a lot, which is this loss of and perhaps the now nascent revitalization of fraternal networks, which used to be a broad broadly available infrastructure, let's say, or form of organization in the United States. People used to joke in other countries that in the US there was an association for everything. And I think this infrastructure, this way of organizing has receded to a large extent. There's partially due to the the civil rights movement, making it difficult for people of European descent and also men to organize and have exclusive spaces for themselves, which makes that difficult. And I think we're seeing right now, for example, with Return to the Land, one of the organizations attempting to test whether that is actually in accordance with the Constitution, and perhaps expanding the rights of particular interest groups or identity groups rather to white people or European descent people. So I think there are fights to be fought on that arena. But I think I want to emphasize here again that in a very real sense, all power is local, and this federal level is very attractive to talk about and to think about because it is flashy. It is where the votes of the highest offices in the land happen, but it is not where the actual fights happen on a day-to-day level that end up producing these larger outcomes over the long term. So I agree entirely. Okay, great. So with that understanding in place, how do you think about the situation we're in right now? You have recently talked more about kind of building local intel cells as a practical thing that people can do to organize. You have also you also consistently report what the latest developments are on the left side of the aisle, or perhaps rather this revolutionary movement that really isn't just political left. It is a communist communist movement, really, that also has the buy-in from powers behind the scenes that don't particularly care about ideology, but that care about power and control. So can you tell us a bit about how you see the current landscape first, before we then go into the intel cells?
Sure. Well, the United States has obviously been in a period of what we call low-intensity conflict, going back probably since 2008, since the great financial crisis that we had, global financial crisis, and then the Occupy Wall Street, a little ways after that. And that was obviously because Obama became president in 2009, and he was a Marxist in chief. And then you see this large groundswell and a lot of infrastructure being built because a lot of money was being poured into it. And so I think that is, I would say, that's not the root, but that is the beginning of the branch of this 100-year battle that we've had, at least in the United States, against leftism. And this goes back to the Socialist Workers' Party and the Communist Party USA, which was established in 1919. And this is actually our third fight with leftist violence, kind of the third iteration, being the late teens and early 20s in the United States, and then in the 60s and 70s, and now for the past.
People don't know, especially of my generation, that in the 70s there were bombings, multiple bombings every week for like a year or two or more. I don't actually know the details, but I've heard that it was quite intense, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people cite, and it's a great book, and everyone should read it. It's by Brian Burrow. It's called Days of Rage, and yeah, he cites FBI statistics that say there were over 2,500 bombings in the first 18 months of 1971 and 1972. And that's like a big takeaway from the book. It's a good one, but there's a lot of other ones, especially about how FBI was actually penetrating some of these left-wing groups. Everyone should read it. It's a great book. At any rate, so that's probably like the origin of this branch. It's not exactly the root. And so I look at, people talk about the left, and the left is not a monolith. There are different factions on the left, and I look at it broadly between you're a member of kind of the revolutionary left, and you don't want to. It's basically revolutionaries and reformers. That's how I look at it, reformers. So the revolutionary left doesn't want to take over a democracy. They either want to abolish all forms of government, like we see on the revolutionary anarchist left, or you have tankies and they say, well, we don't. They're Leninists or Stalinists or whatever they are, and then you have the reform left, the social democrats, and so these are your progressives and kind of establishment left is what I call them. So, or is what they're called. So I think it's very important when you're looking at lines of effort to attribute that to a specific faction of the left. And there's a lot of overlap, but a lot of these people on the left actually do not get along. And they may be temporary allies of convenience, but they want very different outcomes. So I think it's important to categorize that first of all. And then when you're looking at specific action, identifying where's this actually coming from. So Indivisible is an establishment left, like progressive left movement. And you can call them revolutionary in that they want a rapid change in who is control of the government, but they're not abolitionists. They don't want to abolish government. They just want to take it over and reform it and turn it into a socialist style government. So right now what we're looking at in the United States is the building blocks of a color revolution. And broadly, we're looking at 3 phases in this from 2025 to 2028, which is our next big presidential election. And those 3 phases are protest, organized resistance, and then revolution. And we're in the protest phase currently. So they're building the base layer. They're almost ready to escalate into phase 2, which is organized resistance. And so whenever you talk, we're looking at an escalation ladder here. And whenever you try to move up a rung of the escalation ladder, it's not even so much a matter of, can you do this? It is a matter of, do people support you doing this? Because if enough people don't support you, your support's going to run out and you're not going to be able to escalate like you want to. So part of the reason why they're building this, trying to build this broad-based coalition of various groups is to get people into these protests. And that is they're looking for a certain benchmark or a certain level of grassroots support. And of course, everyone supports peaceful protest. Mass appeal is so important to this movement. This is a mass mobilization movement. And their goal is to move people from mass protest to mass resistance. And you can't get to mass resistance unless you have a large enough pool currently in the protest phase. So they're trying to push protesters into resistance. And this is a lot riskier activity. You may be arrested. So this is stuff like obstruction and civil disobedience, and they call it strategic nonviolence. And strikes and protests and walkouts, and there's 198 different tactics that Gene Sharp recommends for this. So a pretty wide array of action, and we're getting into that. It's going to be a lot more disruptive.
Which is also why they need to use such strong emotional amplitude to get people to lock into this kind of social identity, right? Like you need to draw on strong enough emotional resonances so that they commit to this fight.
Yes, they have to condition certain beliefs in people, and they do that by repeating lies over and over again. And one thing I've noticed too is they have gone from saying Trump is an authoritarian and we're at risk, our democracy at risk, and over like the past month or so, they've been saying we live under an authoritarian government here. And so obviously, if you can get people, a plurality or a majority of Americans, to believe that they live under an authoritarian government, you greatly expand your available courses of action, because now you have more extreme circumstances. And that what's the saying about requiring more extreme actions or solutions? So that's obviously where they're going. But I really want to stress this: they cannot do that without support. And they need the support of the elites to be able to do this. And so that's these mass protests are a signal, or maybe a signpost to the elite that enough support is there. That's how I look at it.
What do you say to people who look at that and kind of take this perhaps naive stance of saying this is just a grift for the organizer class that the left has cultivated over a long period of time to kind of still get money out of the kind of withering funding networks, perhaps, and it's not really accomplishing much. Like, how do you view that claim?
I mean, I'm sure there's some grifting on the left, and then there are people who say this is not really a color revolution; it's just standard left-wing organizing and left-wing protest. And if you don't know a lot, I can see how you arrive at that conclusion. But when you actually go in and read the history of color revolutions and see the terminology that they're using, the strategies that they're using, and the tactics that they're using, it's the exact same stuff as the 9 classic color revolutions that started in 2000. So I don't think it's I mean, these people are true believers. I don't think it's a grift. I think some of them actually believe that mud democracy is at risk or under threat. And, their goal is to convince others of that. I think some people are latching on to that message knowing that it is hyperbole, it's hyperbolic, but they cannot progress without people believing the hyperbole. And so they're in this, I mean, that's why they repeat these lies so frequently. Like 7 million Americans mobilized for No Kings 2.0. There's no way there's 7 million Americans. So, but they have to repeat that lie because they can't show that they can't actually admit that their movement is not growing. And I think they're probably about flat from No Kings 1 to 2, 3 to 5 million people, probably 3 million in the first, about that in the second one. That's what I think. So I don't think it's, I mean, these people are true believers. The people who are actually running it, I think, are getting involved.
But they need that 7 million number to then be able to claim the popular support so that they can move to the next stage, right? Like and it doesn't even matter whether it's true. It's just if it's repeated enough times and if they have enough footage that gives you the impression that there's a lot of popular support, that is all that they need.
Yes. Who is going to go out and take risk if your goal is not achievable? Not many people. Some will, but not many. And so there has to be you have to instill this belief that you can win. Pretty classic left-wing organizing is really based on like a rubric of 3 prerequisites. Is it widely felt? Is it deeply felt? And is it winnable? And is it winnable is very important because people are not going to expend money and effort and resources, and certainly not take risk of being arrested if there's not even a chance of victory. So yeah, I agree. That's exactly why they have to inflate these numbers to give the appearance. And if people, perception is reality. If people perceive that this movement has mass, broad-based support, then they're far more likely to get involved.
How would you view then the difference between left-wing organizing and right-wing organizing? Is there even such a thing as right-wing organizing? Is it something that is very different from place to place, or do we perhaps need a Bible of right-wing organizing that the left has with Rules for Radicals, or what was the other one? People Power, I think, is the kind of modern, updated one. How do you view that?
Yeah, there's several really good books on left-wing organizing. And of course, there's a such thing as right-wing organizing. We don't do it very well, and it's not, community organizer is a career path on the left. It is a hobby for some people on the right. But, I hate to invoke the name of Charlie Kirk, but TPUSA did an extremely good job of organizing young conservatives on these campuses. And Scott Pressler is a really good example, doing the voter registration drive and probably delivering Pennsylvania in the 24 elections. But there's not enough Scott Presslers, and there's not enough TPUSA, and there's not enough money flowing into those organizations. Like I was just looking at I don't know if it's a new group or not, but it's new to me. It's called Frontline for Freedom, and it's a new left-wing student organization, or I say student organization. And I was just scrolling through their website, and at the bottom of their website, they have 20 partners, like 20 partner organizations. And they donate money, I'm sure, and guidance, mentorship, training, whatever. And I was just thinking, like, what right-wing billionaires are getting behind right-wing organizing? Like, we don't have those same kind of funnels or patronage systems that I don't think we do, at least. Not that I've seen, that the left has. But the left has been doing this very successfully for decades, and we need to get caught up. And so this is not a thing where you can say, well, I'm not a community organizer, or I don't want to organize for the Republican Party, go ahead and get past those ideas, because you've got to be a community organizer. You may not be a Scott Pressler, but you've got to organize your community. And you may not like the Republican Party, but let's be honest, that's the vehicle that we have for electoral power. So if you don't like the Republican Party, run candidates who are better than the rhinos who are in there, or run the people that you want and get your people into power. That's how I look at it.
Right. Yeah, I think people need to recognize also that the right wing is fundamentally different from the left wing in the way that it views itself and the way that it tends to organize, I think. The left has, generally speaking, an easier time building these larger coalitions and essentially acting as a herd that follows a particular directionality consistently, iteratively, and kind of taking the small wins all along. And the right tends to be, because the right inherently is always particular to a religion or a place or a worldview, it tends to organize in packs, more like groups that have their specific coherent identity and form of organization. And then there's other groups or other packs that have different forms of identity and different forms of organization. So I think the inherent difference or challenge that the right wing has is not to join the overall collective right wing movement, which in some sense doesn't exist. I mean, it exists in the sense of people understand we want to just defend against the left, but defense, if you only play defense, you never go on the offense. You have a hard time winning anything. The one who wants to be left alone will always lose to the one who wants to win. And so I think the right then has to learn to act with the particularities that it itself is subject to, and essentially to operate like a pack of packs, or rather where the packs that have their particular interests own a particular space. They exercise dominion over that, and they work with other packs to assure one another mutual defense in doing so for the kind of dominion of the other pack where they are at, or what they lay claim to. And so it's less about coming together under one shared banner and more about being able to continuously account for one's own interests and the interests of one's group, the interests of the groups that one is in relationship with or neighbors to or share some interests with, and then to account for those shared interests and, as you said, on an issue, work together to accomplish a specific objective. I think this is often forgotten in protest reflex, or in this complaining about a particular political issue. Unless you have a specific outcome that you're demanding, or unless you have a specific demand, it's very easy to let a protest dissolve into nothing, because people cannot, for a long time, spend the energy to pursue something, because they have to still do their jobs, they have to run their families, they have to participate in their communities. And so unless you have a specific demand, it's very hard to actually accomplish anything when you feel enraged and you want to give that expression. So how do you view kind of what I just said about how the right-wing organizing has to be different from left-wing organizing, and how do you view this challenge of actually acting with specific outcomes in mind, rather than this generalized, I don't like what is going on and I will protest about it?
Mm-hmm. Well, I hear that a lot. Mike, we have jobs and we have families and we have other commitments, and that's why we don't get involved in any of this stuff. Or we don't have $300 million to go out and put on a protest or whatever. And I get there. I get where you're coming from. I have a slightly different perspective. And again, I'm an intel guy. I'm not a philosopher. I'm not, just take this for what I see is, I think there is some truth in saying the right tends to be more individualistic, and the left tends to be more collectivist. I would just say I've got a little bit of a spin on that. And I say the left is far more willing to submit themselves. And we on the right, I submit to God and I submit to my family. And I don't want to submit my sovereignty. I don't want to submit to a group. And I think that's really where it comes down to, is we're not suborning our own desires or resources to a group, by and large. And that's how I see it. When you look at these organizations, like I look at very successful left-wing, like special interest organizations, like you said, they have one thing, like they have one goal. legalize abortion or something like that. And you get all these true believers in there, and they submit themselves to the cause. A lot of these people are willing to be arrested. They donate their money. They donate their time to this one cause. They submit themselves to the cause. And I'm sorry, I'm not submitting myself to Ted Cruz. I don't want to get these rhinos elected. And so I think that's a big difference that I've seen on the right is we do not want to submit to other people like the left does.
Right. I guess in that sense, I think the way to think about it, to organize it then is to actually form strong groups anyway that have that shared sense of this is what we're about, and to kind of patrol the boundaries of your influence, right? And to work together with others where your interests overlap. So, okay, great. Then I think we're coming up to the end, and so I'd like you to use the last perhaps 5-10 minutes to speak a bit about this idea of an intel cell, local intel cell. How does that differ from a neighborhood watch or just a friend group? Is it just that? What makes it different from other ways of organizing? And why should you do it? And then how do you actually go about that?
Well, I would say we need intelligence because we all have gaps in our knowledge, information gaps. And when you're responding to an emergency, whether that's a wildfire or a hurricane or a riot or something worse, you need information so that you can make time-sensitive decisions. And when you have an information flow, when you have real-time information coming in, decision-making gets easier. And when you don't have any information coming in, or you have bad information coming in, it's much more easy to make bad decisions. And so I don't want to make bad decisions. I want to be able to act first, which means I need intelligence early and often. And so I just say from a practical perspective, having even if it's just you and a friend or you and a couple people, get together. And like in my area, we just started on a signal group. We started having monthly meetings, but we have a signal group. And people, whenever there's, like the other day, there was a fire in my town. And people were like, oh, there's a big plume of smoke and some restaurant was on fire somewhere. Or it was a hotel or something. Or there's a police chase, or there's a crime, and something happens. And we're all sharing information in our signal chat. And so this started back during COVID. And it really kind of started because guys wanted to go buy ammo, and there's not around to be found that was in a common caliber here. And so you'd have a guy run by Academy and be like, oh, yeah, they got, 10 boxes of 9mm in or whatever, and it's, and then guys would go over there and get whatever ammo they wanted, or they would go and take a picture of the ammo section, and you could zoom in and see what ammo they had and what they didn't. And everyone just kind of realized, like, yeah, this is actually a lot easier when we have. They didn't call it intelligence collection, but that's exactly what it was. It's a lot, making decisions on and trying to get things you need is a lot easier when you do have information. So this kind of runs in the background, and it is an informal information sharing network. And that is a really good place to start for most people. And just to share local news stories, share things that you see, questions that you have about the area. And that's something that you can get your friends and family on board, or, certain friends, certainly. That's a really good, really, really good way to start, is just starting a signal chat and inviting your friends and just say, or your neighbors, having a neighborhood. I know there's like Nextdoor and there's all these Facebook groups about these community neighborhood groups. I'm not a big fan of Facebook. I actually don't want that stuff on Facebook. Signal is only a little bit better. So, even then it's like, hey, like the other day we got new neighbors in a while ago, and I caught him out there, moving, and I was just saying hello. And as I was leaving, I was like, hey, if someone comes up in the neighborhood, like how can I get in touch with you? And he's like, oh yeah, sure, here's my cell phone. And so I got his contact information. And that's just a really good way to start, and just send him a text message. And then if you see him, develop that relationship with him. And then eventually, once you have his name, look him up there's a website called Open Secrets. And if he's made hard money political campaign contributions, it'll be on there. So if he donates to Trump, I'll be like, yeah, I need to get to know this guy. If he donated to Bernie Sanders, it's like, well, I probably still need to get to know this guy. So I would look for those kinds of opportunities. And to selectively build out your network, and that's really the best way to get started. Now, as far as the neighborhood watch goes, that is a de facto intelligence sharing network. They may not look at themselves as intelligence collectors, but that's exactly what they're doing. So that's also a really good way to start. And I've heard people have had great success in starting a local neighborhood watch. You can do that through the National Neighborhood Watch Association, and it's run in conjunction with, in I think many or most cases, your local sheriff's office. And then I've heard people that say they try to start one and their neighbors are extremely hostile to it. So your mileage may vary, but those are two really good ways to get started.
Excellent. Have you seen anybody kind of run with this concept or with this thing and really take it to a level that you didn't expect, or kind of did you get any interesting stories from people taking this up and then reporting back what they did with this?
Yeah, there's actually a handful of cases where they have grown into. There was one in the Pacific North. It was in Washington State actually, and they grew. They had like 100 or 200 families. I don't know. It was a large organization. Not all of them showed up to all their meetings, but they had these assembly meetings, and it started in their neighborhood, and they just expanded. And of course, it's a religious community, so they already have a lot of shared ideology there. But I think that's a really great example. And then when you have people in local business and in local office, and you've got people in schools, and in the Army we said every soldier is a sensor, and so every soldier has an obligation to pass up information of intelligence value, and they treated it the same way. So I think that's a really good example. And there's a handful of smaller groups like that just started as community groups, and then they're like, hey, we actually can practice actual intelligence gathering here. And so they have their requirements. They say, hey, this is the information we're looking for. This is what we want to know. And then they go to the people in their group and they say, who could answer this specific information, who could answer the specific question or get the specific piece of information. And then they go seek them out. And that's just very basically how human intelligence is done anyway. You have your human sources. And so I think there's maybe a misconception. I should probably clear something up. You can have your own intelligence network that you run. And there's a big difference between having an information sharing network, which is pretty informal and volunteer based, and then having an intelligence network, which is a lot more formal, and it's an actual intelligence gathering operation at the local level. But even then, you don't need to necessarily start either one of those. Having I don't know, I'm not a sports ball guy, but just having like football, linking up with football fans, or if you play board games, or your kid's goes to swim meets, get all the parents in a chat, or do something like that. Try to organize, because really we're just looking for sources. We're trying to develop relationships with people and look at who these people are and what they know and where they work and what they believe, and then trying to pick those people out of our community and put them on our network. And that's a lot of this stuff is done at a social level, not necessarily like I'm going to go out and recruit this intelligence source. We develop friendships with these people, and that's the best way to get sources for like the average person.
Right. Yeah. It depends on, of course, your own life and your circumstances, which of these kind of forms of escalated effort you're able and willing to sustain. So start off where you're at, meet people, put them into a shared context, whether it be a messaging group or perhaps weekly, monthly, bi-weekly, whatever it may be, meet up, and just build those relationships out. And that alone has value beyond this, let's say, the political conflict that this may be partially motivated by, but also on the very direct interpersonal level.
Can I give you another example,
please?
Briefly? Yeah, so in Algeria, during the Algerian insurgency between the FLN and the French, this is back in 54 to 60 something, mid 60s. And the insurgents, who were some variations of, there was a bunch of different insurgent groups, but they were like either like Muslim Islamists or communists, or sometimes both. And they would go around, the communists at least, they went around and they started like a knitting circle, and they collected all the women in the village who wanted to go knit. And it was ostensibly just a knitting circle, but it was actually a communist indoctrination vehicle, because they talked about communist issues there, and they did this, that was their recruiting pipeline almost. And there were sports leagues. They put all these kids in a recreational soccer league. And so who were the coaches? The coaches were the communists. It was an indoctrination program. So all these things were just ostensibly very social, run-of-the-mill, very normal things, at least outwardly. But it was a kind of spotting and assessing almost, trying to recruit kids. And maybe they would be lookouts or scouts. Maybe their dad was in the military, and now this kid's feeding information about what his dad's army job or whatever. So look for like just common everyday opportunities where you can generate contact with people, because that's what human intelligence is all about.
Yeah, and this can actually occupy you and keep you away from wasting your time on social feeds where you're not spending it well either. So great. I think we're coming up on the end. I'll just share one more time about what Mike and I are doing at the program that I'm organizing. Mike will be hosting a practical session at my Modern Minuteman program. And if you want to check that out, you can do so at this link, modernminuteman.net. Mike will teach you how to build that local intel cell, go a lot more in depth on kind of what to consider, how to think about organizing it perhaps. And importantly, this is going to be a flipped classroom model. This means that you'll receive the information that Mike wants you to know in advance of the live session, and then in the live session itself, we work much more intensely on practically applying it to your own life rather than kind of sitting through a lecture as such. And you get to ask your questions and get answers and make connections with other people who are doing the same. So this could be a means for you to build those kind of far away relationships and then use those to help guide you while you're building your local intel cell and building those social relationships. If you are interested, you are also welcome to use Mike's code Shelby at checkout for $50 off. And if you already have people that you are in relationship with, maybe you already have your intel cell, or you're signing up your local football bros, whatever it may be, then you can also sign up as a crew. And then you will get your own crew space where you can work with your existing relationships to kind of digest the information that you're getting from Mike and the other instructors, and kind of practice that coordination and cooperation while you're going through the program. So please do check that out. Mike will be speaking there, I believe, on November the 12th. At least that's the current date we're aiming at. And we have a number of other instructors who are kind of filling out the content around this intel cell in much more depth and kind of other domains that you might want to pay attention to if you want to become what I'm terming a modern Minuteman, somebody who is aware of the conflicts and the forces that act on their own lives, and that has the basic abilities to account for their own interests and to act in service of them with other people that he shares his interests with. So do check that out. Thank you for coming on, Mike. I appreciate it. And I'll hit us off the end with the promo trailer once again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for the opportunity.
Your moral intuition has been taken away from you.
Our civilization isn't an emergency. We are descending down ever faster.
And your moral license to act has been denied to you.
We have to stop being willing to sacrifice the future of our people for our convenience.
We will not abandon you.
We're in the conflict though. You're either serving your enemy or you're serving your side. Right? Those are the choices. It's not whether or not to be in the conflict anymore. We're way past that. That's a luxury we no longer have.
Where good people have to hide, evil flourishes.
We will re-give you that moral authorization.
If we don't have a revolution, in other words, we don't get a reformation, we're going to have a civil war.